Let's talk about exponential functions. So let's define it first. An exponential function is a function of the form y equals a times b to the x, where a is not equal to 0 and b is greater than 0. So b is not only not equal to 0, it has to be greater than 0. It is not a negative number. So for instance, if I had y equals 2 times 3 to the x, or that a can be equal to 1 and I just have y equals 4 to the x. I can have a be a fraction, y equal, or b be a fraction too, 1/2 to the x, okay? So really we're looking for constants as our bases, and x is going to be our exponent, which is something we have not really seen before. And if we're looking at one of these and how to graph these, let's start by looking at y equals 3 to the x. I know that b is greater than 1. So if b is greater than 1, I'm going to be looking at something called growth. And we'll talk more about growth at a later time. But let's go ahead and create a t-chart so we can kind of get some points to graph. So if x is 1, and I plug that into my formula over here, and we'll kind of model it. If x is 1, then 3 to the first is equal to 3. If x is 2, 3 squared is equal to 9. If x is 0, 3 to the 0, anything to the 0 is 1. If x is negative 1, 3 to the negative first power is really 1 over 3. And if x is negative 2, 3 to the second power, negative second, would be 1 over 9. Okay? So we have some good points to graph with. So let's go ahead and draw our coordinate plane. And we'll graph some of these points. So I know that when x is 0, y is 1. That's kind of a good place to start at. So that's this. When x is 1, y is now up 3. When x is 2, y is up 9. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? When x is negative 1, y is a third. So here's 1, a third of that would kind of be like here. When x is negative 2, it's now 1/9. So that's really close. It's not quite on the 0 line, but it's getting really close. And I'm not going to be able to draw a straight line through these because these are not linear functions, they're exponential functions. And so what I'm going to do is kind of draw a little bit of a curve. And if I was good, I could hit through all those points. We'll pretend. But you'll notice it grows really, really fast. And when people talk about things growing exponentially, this is what they mean. Notice it never is going to ever hit 0. There's this line here. It'll approach 0, but it'll never really hit the 0. So there's a line where x is equal to 0. And since it never hits 0, it never touches that line, it just gets really, really, really close, we'll call that a horizontal asymptote. So asymptote is kind of a good word to learn. And exponential functions we'll talk about today have horizontal asymptotes. There are also things as vertical asymptotes. We'll get to that as well at some point. So let's try one more of these exponential functions. We'll try y is equal to 1/3 of x. Notice now that b is less than 1. So instead of growth, I'm now looking at decay. And again, we'll set up a chart so that we can graph some points. And I'm going to do a 3 chart this time, just so it's a little bit easier to read. So let's say x is -2. So we have 1/3 to the -1 to the -2 power. If I wrote that out, that would be, remember I can put that on the denominator. It'll end up being 1/3. I'll flip it, so it's 3/1 squared, which is 9. So here I have 9. Let's say I use x is 0. Well, we know anything to the 0th power is 1. If I use 2, 1/3 squared is 1/9. If I use cubed, 1/3 cubed would be 1/27. If I use to the 4th power, 1/3 to the 4th power would be 1/81. So I'm getting like exponentially small because 1/81 approximates to 0.1. So I'm getting really, really close to 0 again, but I'm not going to touch it. Okay? When I go ahead and graph this, it's going to look very similar, except, so I had when x is 0, y is 1, so that's here. But when x is -2, come on. So when it's -2, I'm now up 9 on my y-axis. So 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And this one, if you could guess, -1 would give me 3 over here. And then I'm looking for when it's 2, I'm at 1/9. When it's x is 3, I'm looking at 1/27. When x is 4, I'm looking at 1/81. So I'm getting extremely close, but not ever touching 0. So now my exponential function, when I connect my dots, will look like this. So decay kind of faces the opposite direction from how growth faced. Okay? So it says if it had flipped over the y-axis and now is a mirror image. Thanks for watching.